Thank you for tuning into the Pre-Patch Podcast. And check out these patch notes.
Square Enix had their own kind of announcement. They just, they launched Forspoken. It was a little rocky, but all in all, I don't think it was rocky enough to do this. Luminous Productions, which is the studio that's, built Forspoken, has been shut down. So
it's to be expected. I think there
Really?
is more of a yes, and I can give you a few reasons why. I've looked into the case. I'm glad that Enigma brought it up because I completely forgot to throw it into the news. But there's a lot of reasons for it, and it's not necessarily just because Forspoken launched with
I don't think it has
critical
anything
reception.
to do with. I honestly I don't think it has anything to do with the reception or like.
To be honest,
I wouldn't say it doesn't have anything to do, but I don't think that it was like the deciding factor.
I think Forspoken was the product of Luminous Studios overalls. There's something going on with that group and how they function, like the inner workings work. That is a problem. And I think Square Enix has recognized that, and they're going to absorb them back into the company so that they can better micromanage them, because there's obviously a management issue within that group.
I believe this shutdown was in the works even before Forspoken shutdown, or before Forspoken released. I think this has been in the works probably even before, like as early on in Forspoken's development time. They probably were like, yeah, after you guys release this, we're done.
Even if it would have just crushed it out of the water,
I don't know
commercially.
If it would have done extremely well, like if it would have sold extremely well and come out without a lot of the issues that we had talked about on that podcast, right? Maybe they would have given them another chance.
Yeah,
but I don't know.
I doubt it. And the reasons why it didn't do bad commercially. It was the seventh highest grossing game out of January. So it actually did fairly decently commercially for Square Enix. It wasn't a flop on that front by any means. It was a public flop. I will say that a good majority of the gaming community was either mixed or negative about it. It's what many are considering. The kids are calling the epitome of mid these days. But it was a 10-year development cycle. That was riddled at least 2 complete overhauls of what the game was going to be about in the central premises of it. 10 years on a product that came out in the mixed state that it did. What makes this worse is the prior game that they had to this, which was Final Fantasy 15, had the exact same development cycle. It was a 10-year project that in the middle of it, like year 5 or year 6, basically they had to rebuild the game completely because they scrapped the original concept and wanted to remake it. Somewhere in the development cycle, this group cannot solidify an idea and stick to it. Whether they're overambitious, whether the extended development time has made it so that, okay, what we were making a game for back in this year, we have now advanced so far in time that niche of an audience isn't as interested in that anymore, and we have to modernize it for the times. I don't know.
So they're the last epoch of single player games.
Pretty much. They've made 2 games in 20 years, and this is what we've kind of gotten out of it.
I thought Forspoken was their first title.
No. Forspoken was their first title under Luminous Studios games.
Oh, they
yeah, Final Fantasy 15, they were still Business Division 2, and then after that game, Square Enix was like, okay, here you go. We'll have a trial run of this, see what you can do. And Square is determined that they're just not. I'm not gonna say they're not competent enough, because the developers
they work better under other teams is essentially what fucking Square is saying at this point.
Taking them back in to Square.
So they're shutting down the studio.
Yeah,
they're shutting down the studio, but all the developers, as far as I can tell,
there was not a single layoff that I've been able to find.
So all the developers are just being reabsorbed back into the company, essentially.
So
which is it's a happy ending for those devs. They're basically
they got what they wanted. They said they were happy with Forspoken. I mean, like you said, it still was received. It wasn't received well, but commercially it was. So I mean, it still did good.
Yeah,
So-
commercially it did fine. Like I said, it was the 7th highest grossing game in January. I don't figure
Yeah.
it'll be on the charts for February.
Okay.
But it did not do poorly for launch compared to a lot of games out there.
Here's the kicker, though, right? Like, this is all fine and dandy and great for the four of us, for our niche communities that understand this, the people that investigate it, that look in, take the time to read it, or whatever else. If you're Joe Blow walking down, scrolling through Twitter or whatever else, and you see this, and then you see Forspoken, to go and you're about to click the buy button, I am very certain that it is going to be detrimental to the game even further to say, oh yeah, because the everyday person is not going to be like, oh well, they just got folded in and all the developers came in and there's no layoffs and to be like, oh, we're still going to get DLC and they're not going to give a shit. Like they're literally just going to go like, no, I'm not going to buy it. I'll buy something else. Like I don't think that it.
Yeah, I wonder if there's going to be any further development after May 1st at all.
I mean, they're saying that
DLC. I don't think there's going to be more DLC. I think they're only going to have one DLC.
There's only one DLC.
But
The company gets reabsorbed into Square in May 1st is when they get reabsorbed. The DLC is going to come out in April.
Yeah.
And they're going to continue to do patches and updates to make the game more stable and stuff like that.
It'll essentially go into a skeleton crew, more or less. You'll have like a group of developers working on it for patch content, and then once they get it to a point where it's like, okay, that's good enough, it'll end development.
I don't know.
I see what you're saying though, Sin. I mean, it does kind of give off the wrong message if you were looking and interested in this game at all, seeing this.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, the other side about this that continues to give me worries about this, right? And look, it's not a shocker. There is another game that Square Enix was behind, publishing wise, that they in their I can't say they, but in their portfolio fucked me over, which was Avengers. So I'm not saying that Forspoken fucked anybody over. I'm not saying that kind of stuff, but like looking into this kind of stuff, it's just kind of like, what can Square Enix not go and manage a studio or public? Like, and I don't Crystal Dynamics they're not under the umbrella of Square, right? Like,
no,
not anymore. I don't think were they
Embracer
originally?
now, aren't they? Isn't Crystal Dynamics Embracer?
They got sold out to Embracer Group, I'm pretty sure.
And I actually know I think they were under Square Enix. I think Square Enix sold off those
I think they
properties
were
too.
under Square Enix originally, and then Square Enix sold them off, if I remember correctly.
Do they not have, like, I know people are saying like, oh, Luminous Studios Productions, like their management team needs to be more micromanaged or whatever else. I reverse that and go, as someone that has managed people, like, can you not learn how to manage your studios and your people in a way that they're going to go and produce content that is up to the level that the consumer expects and what your expectations are? Like, can you not pull those reins? And again,
I genuinely feel like Square Enix, when it comes to when it comes to non-Square Enix directed titles, Square Enix is extremely lax on the leash. They don't give a fuck. We've had Avengers, we've had Balan's Wonderworld, we've had a bunch of games that have come out from Square Enix production, but not Square Enix development, that have been absolute stinkers. I do think they're too lax on the leash. It is a Square Enix problem.
So originally, Crystal Dynamics was under Square Enix and they got sold to Embracer Group back in August of 2022, along with Eidos Montreal and Square Enix Montreal.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. That's just kind of my thoughts here. I not saying that Luminous deserves like the pass here. Like, obviously they took way too long. 10 years is fucking crazy. But
there was obviously issues within the development studio, and I'm happy that they got the chance to do it, and I'm happy that nobody's losing their jobs because of it.
Right.
But
one thing I did want to talk about, and I don't know if you want to talk about this as well, Bill, is we were talking about, we were talking in the chat just barely about how this game financially was a success, but somebody in the chat brought up like Hi-Fi Rush, which was a a title that released from Microsoft about the same time, and they sold more copies but did not do as well financially. One thing you got to remember though is between these two games, as I said in the chat, Hi-Fi Rush was a $30 game, whereas
Well, Hi-Fi Rush
Forspoken was a $70 game.
Hi-Fi Rush also was their development. You can't deny like 10 years development. That's a Destiny took 10 years to develop.
That's huge.
Like that's a long fucking time.
And
That's
again,
my
when you say 10-year development time, you expect a full 10 years to go into that, into the product to be ridiculously good. It has to be to justify that long of a development time. When in reality, you're probably getting a 3-year developed game because they couldn't pin down what they wanted to do with the product.
It's like Cyberpunk. So Cyberpunk was in development for, I believe they said like 12 years, 13 years, something like that.
Yeah.
But like 7 years into it, they completely redid the entire fucking game. Like 2 years after they completely redid the game, they redid it again because apparently, it wasn't good enough. And then look at the state that it released in. Like it was a trash heap when it first released. So
Hi-Fi Rush also did not only shadow drop in some more copies, they also dropped on Game Pass day one as well.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting to see the
drop on Game Pass. That's pretty impressive as well.
It's kind of interesting to see the dynamic between the two.
It is. I think that price point is a big driver, though. We say it constantly that the $70 price point is a detractor, and a game has to be worth that $70 price point to be bought up and to have good like numbers on sales. A $30 price point. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
A $30 price point, it's a lot more digestible, especially when the product is being touted as positively as it is.
There's such a sweet spot for price points. I hate to say it, but I just like these AAA titles going $60, $70. Like I feel like they gotta figure out that if they get that sweet spot, they'd sell 100% more copies. If the game's going to be worth $50, $40, $30, I think it'll just do numbers for them.
When I also think that
$60 standard.
I also think that comparing Forspoken to Hi-Fi Rush is a little out there too, because like granted, yes, they are both amazing games. I think there's a huge difference between the two, right? Like one's a full fledged.
You couldn't even say that with the.
I mean, I had to smile there for a second.
I heard the cringe in your voice.
Well, okay, I'll rehash that. While they're two great games, one is definitely better than the other, but they're both like it's like comparing fucking like Tetris to a fucking new age RPG. Sin's like about to fight, bro. Anyways,
about Tetris.
I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing.
I will end this conversation, at least my portion of it, from I am still very much enjoying Forspoken. I do not regret my purchase, but I completely understand where people's issues with it is, and I completely understand why Square has made the decision to do what they've done with Luminous Studios, given how long they had in the product we got. I'm still happy with the product. I'm having fun with it, but I understand I'm in the minority in that opinion.
Do you see yourself picking up the DLC?
I'll definitely pick up the DLC. I enjoy the game enough to warrant the DLC purchase. Yes.
There you go.
I think there's a shimmer of something good, like potentially great in that game, but the development hell that it went through, I think, has really soured the overall experience for most.
And I think if you're gonna compare a game to a game, right? While I was quiet, I was looking this up. I wanted to see January 2023 NPD top 20 best-selling video games of the month, and this is just US, but this equates to the world, right? Like maybe some shifting. Dead Space was number 2, right? The remake of Dead Space.
Yeah. Dead Space was an amazing fucking remake. Like
Forspoken was number 7.
Yeah.
Like you know, so you're now comparing apples to apples when you're talking about cost price point, and what those games were. So
great comparison.
Hey, we hope you enjoyed this episode of the Patch Notes. Don't forget, you can catch our cast live every Thursday night at 10:30 Eastern Standard, right here on YouTube and Twitch.tv. You can also find us at anchor.fm/prepatch podcast, as well as the many other podcast platforms. You better be there.